Welcome to the Profitability Optimization and Connected Planning webinar. My name is Ariba Kamal, VP of Sales at Apps Associates, and your host. In today's webinar, we will cover the process of connected planning and how organizations are automating this process of synchronizing financial and operational data for better insights, which in turn lead them to better decisions. We will demonstrate how Oracle Cloud applications with the power of AI can give you the insights so you can outperform your competition and optimize profitability. That said, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters today. Kyle Gamel, Director of EPM and Analytics at Apps Associates. Kyle has over 20 years of experience in the office of the CFO and with Oracle and non-Oracle applications. Mike Russell, Principal Solution Engineer at Oracle, brings 20 plus years of experience as a Hyperion Oracle user and administrator. And finally, Manoj Parmeshwaran, ERP Practice Director at Apps Associates, also with over 20 years of experience as a cross-functional solution architect for Oracle on-premise and cloud applications. I'm sure all of you attending today are familiar with Oracle applications and what Oracle does. For those of you not familiar with Apps Associates, we are a global systems integrator for Oracle and a number of other solutions and platforms. We cover all back and front office functions with a particular focus on industries that have complex supply chain and operational requirements. Our breadth of services and our functional expertise allows us to take a cross-functional approach so we can deliver complete enterprise solutions for our customers. We are one of Oracle's go-to partners for advisory and implementation services for digital transformations, and you can read more about our industry solutions and accelerators on our website. So without further delay, I will hand it over to our presenters, and please enter your questions in the chat room. We will be monitoring chat and responding to your questions throughout the webinar.
Thanks, Reba. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. We're going to start off with only a few slides, not a death by PowerPoint, and then dive into a demo of the application and talk through how that might actually work for an organization like yours. But we do have a few things to set the stage. This will probably not take the full hour. And if you have questions as we go along, please pop them in the chat. Mike and I will answer some of those, or Manoj will. So let's get rolling. Why are we here, and why even do a webinar on this? Where does this fit, and how does this actually work in the real world? So already said, my quick background, having some history in the office of the CFO, as well as in the operational planning. And there is generally a disconnect between strategic finance and day-to-day operations. And when it comes to whether it be forecasting or budget season or day-to-day operations, there's a conflict at which level you're dealing with, and how do you maximize the organizational profit. And so what we want to talk about is coming from a single pane of glass with the sophistication that the Oracle platform provides for you, as well as note that as we work through this one, that it can come, data can come from all over. It doesn't have to come from just an Oracle platform. But in this one, we'll be talking mainly that direction. So on the at least depending on which way you're looking at your screen, on the basic questions are the ones that generally come up, and you get a certain answer to that. That's, things like, hey, what do we think, what are we going to sell? It's budget forecast time. What is it going to be over last year? How much are we going to produce at which plant? It's asking questions that are traditional questions for the FP&A or the planning side, or even the operational side. Hey, what are we looking at? More intelligent questions is how do we maximize our profit? Who should we sell to based on the contribution margin, demand, and all the costs that are associated with it? Where should we actually produce things in order to maximize our profit? And how do we leverage systems in order to get our answers more easily and quickly at a level that we can execute on, but at a strategic level that can help us answer other business questions like, do we expand out into here? Do we run certain marketing campaigns? How do we marry those things up? What we want to do is talk about operational and financial. How do we ask the intelligent questions and get the answers? So with that, I am going to hand it off to Manoj and Mike, and we're going to talk through kind of a panelist style on ERP and EPM suite. Where do they fit? How do we fit these together? So with this, Manoj, why don't you give a quick snippet on ERP and supply chain and how that fits in from an optimization perspective?
Sure. Thank you, Kyle. And Mike and Kyle jump in where appropriate. So just as you know, folks on the webinar have seen all these various areas within the EPM suite. You must be aware that we have similar processes and work stream structures and areas within the ERP also, including in supply chain management. However, we have seen customers, and we are actually working with customers now who have needs that fit outside the processes and the structures, right, that are offered within the ERP and the supply chain suite, including in supply chain planning, right, which is a really key part of what comes with ERP, right? Some of these use cases, right, include needing sales planning outside the traditional demand and supply planning paradigm alone, right? And how do you add in a component for optimization, like Kyle was mentioning before, right? Essentially looking to answer questions like, where can we move material for more efficient transportation costs, for example, right? Or what is the outlook for a given customer location over a longer time frame, right? By incorporating various data inputs like market signals, commodity pricing, and things like that. So take what you have that the ERP offers, but kind of expand that with these additional use cases, right? What we have found is that using EPM here really allows our customers to take the best of the inputs from ERP supply chain, right, which we offer through the Oracle ERP suite, and combine it with data from systems like transportation management, like external non-Oracle systems, and really build a very flexible structure and framework that allows customers to optimize sales over time, right? So it's not just looking at demand and supply alone, but also looking at adding the optimization kind of arrow to the quiver, right? EPM, in our experience, is also a very sustainable solution, right? Because it prioritizes knowledge of configurations over coding, right? So it's not necessarily a SQL only or a technical only solution. And as a result, that keeps the knowledge with the business teams, right? And it's way more sustainable over the long term, right? So those are, some of the points I wanted to cover that really are where we can marry these two kind of elements together. Kyle, Mike.
Yeah, really quickly, I just wanted to mention here that on the right side there, performance management, it's completely system agnostic for source system and single source of truth. So in other words, to buttress up against what Manoj is saying there, EPM is designed in itself to fill in whatever gaps you might have with your ERP. So whatever you're running for your day-to-day, I kind of like to colorfully say that when you're running the business with your ERP, your day-to-day, your transactions, your debits, your credits, etc. But then you have to manage the business. A trial balance in and of itself is a terrific document. It means that the debits equal the credits, but that's it. It doesn't do anything else for you. You have to build a forecast, a cash flow statement, a balance sheet, an income statement, and all of that comes from performance management. And by definition, being able to plug into anything that's even non-Oracle, whether it's SAP, Microsoft, you name it, pulling in that data and then having all of the performance management tools at your disposal is where companies can take advantage of that simple concept there. So we are completely data agnostic and source system agnostic.
Yeah, so let me also fill this in as we kind of walk through where this webinar it came from, and is the fact that supply chain, apps is known for doing a bunch of supply chain and a bunch of EPM, and in doing so, there was a gap where you needed to move information that was at a transactional level within the ERP to a higher level inside EPM at a strategic level and marry those data up, as well as add new data, as both Mike and Manoj were talking about, or additional requirements that were not cost effective or not doable necessarily in supply chain that brought in additional pieces that would make business decisions. So what it did is allow the marrying of the best of both worlds, which was having the planning and at a tactical level and an operational and execution level inside the ERP, but adding additional pieces and moving it to a strategic level within EPM. Now on the right side, Mike demos EPM all the time for Oracle, and so he's on this also to kind of give a lot of flavor and color commentary as we move through the demo. But I do want to kind of point out that EPM is a suite focused on the office of CFO. We're mainly talking about the planning and forecasting and using the ERP data from supply chain and marrying it into there. So we're bringing it into planning. But there could be we've had other clients take that same data and also run it through that profitability, where some of the data needed to be allocated to find out true profitability. But there's other pieces of that EPM suite that focus on that closed reporting side. So whether the accounting or the finance or business finance or operations, this suite can bring in data from a whole host of places. And we'll show that through the demo here in a minute. But that's what we're playing right now. Fire away.
Sorry. No, just really, I know Kyle's going to transition here, but just coming back to what Kyle's saying, performance management, it is archetypal finance and accounting, but there's a lot of stuff in performance management that the entire organization can benefit from. So if you're doing any kind of planning, that's why we're talking about here with operational and logistical planning. We get a little deeper with Kyle. You're going to see some of that manifest where the audience for this is not necessarily finance and accounting. They work together and it creates bridges between departments. So your software actually becomes the Rosetta Stone that you can use to communicate and translate with one another in a much smoother, easier way. Kyle, I just wanted to,
Yeah, no, perfect. No,
go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mike and I've done a ton of these, so we're gonna call it a little bit like a football game or a podcast. But what we want to do is continue to lay the foundation, and then we'll get into an actual demo of this one. But what Mike was just talking about leads into really this next slide, which is EPM was born out of the idea of bringing operations, HR, IT, sales and marketing, all that stuff in that middle, like, Pentagon in there, bringing it all together really for the office of the CFO. And over time, over the last probably 5-7 years, it has expanded out a lot more into operations because, to Mike's point, operations still needs to plan. And while the planning in SCM is at a very granular, trying to match things up to make sure that the shipments get where they need or the materials get where they need. This is much more of bringing it up for more strategic conversations, but using the data on that transactional level. So sometimes you'll see things like called connected planning, which is taking the platform that is EPM and expanding it out into operations, specifically supply chain. And so you're going to have different views across here. And this is our whole fun Venn diagram, which is kind of taking that supply chain. What does supply chain care about? Those tactical operational decisions. How do I make sure I fulfill my demand? How do I make sure that I ship it at the best and economic cost? Where do I get the right materials from? EPM is about how do I maximize the profitability across the organization? Where do I expand into? Where do I not? How do I price it? Things of that nature. And in between is how do we actually execute as an organization? And that's where connected planning is that red section that's really important. And
everybody loves a good Venn diagram, folks.
Everybody does. And,
Go ahead,
and you can see the stats down below. And I actually think I got them from Mike a while back, which was that organizations that have embedded and integrated data in a platform like this, they normally have 8% more profitability and they reduce their cost. And it makes a lot of sense. Instead of spending time trying to do data manipulation in an organization, you can make better decisions because you're asking more intelligent questions. So we kind of term this as an intelligent, optimized, connected planning, which was the mouthful of what the actual demo's name is. But it all comes together in saying that we're using connected planning, which is operational details integrated into a planning platform with optimization to help answer those questions. With that, Mike, anything to add? And then I'm going to keep moving on.
No, I think you nailed it, man. I think this is the just to reiterate the point again that what Kyle is showing you here, and again that red section where they overlap. That's the message here. Again, when I as a solution engineer, I'm always talking to customers about those possibilities, are the possible, and imagine, what if. And like Kyle was saying, that we want supply chain folks who are maybe feeling like, look, we have certain tools, but they're not doing what we need. You can still benefit from, hey, we might see some of that stuff that finance and accounting uses, and it is available to you, and as long as you turn that data spigot on, you can take advantage of the AI ML that's embedded in, the artificial intelligence, machine learning that's embedded in performance management. Kyle's going to get into some of that, later, but it's all available to you. So that's all. Just wanted to, mention that kind of stuff.
Perfect. This is actually a perfect time to answer Doug's question, which
I was about to check the chat. I see that.
Yeah, no, which is perfect. Was hey, how do you contrast this, with integrated business planning and sales and operational planning?
Yeah. So Kyle, do you mind?
No,
Yeah, no.
go for it. Go for it, man.
So Doug, no, Doug, that's a great question. And the reality is they're all one and the same. That's all part of this connected planning umbrella. So integrated business planning is absolutely connected planning, because the idea that, hey, we've got, business processes happening across the organization, that they have their data, they want to take advantage of it, and they can use performance management to manage their part of the business. Sales and operations planning, I demonstrate sales planning all the time these days. Because again, it's part of connected planning, because they do have financial symbiotic relationships. You want your operations teams working in tandem and in parallel with your finance crew. And the exact same principle or concept applies to your sales, operations, and your sales folks. You want all three of those working together, ideally even HR or IT or any groups that might have any kind of planning, forecasting, that want to be able to do reporting and analytics. I have no doubt that integrated business planning, you have reporting needs, both internal and external, that you want to get out there. You can use performance management for that purpose as well. Kyle, if you want to add any
Yeah,
more.
no, you nailed it. So it's going to become even more apparent as we kind of walk through here that we are all circling that same area of how do we marry up operational with finance to come up with the best answers using the data that we can be supplied. Which leads us into maybe making a transition. Now that we've talked about kind of where does this fit and why would you use this combination of a tool set to solve your business problems. Now we're going to actually try and show you some of that in a demo. And what I'm trying to show is on the left side, the objectives, and then the webinar flow is on the right. So that way you can kind of see what we're talking about. And then we're going to go dive in the application, play a little bit, and then answer questions as we go along. But I do want to...
Kyle, before you jump, because I don't mean, I'm just thinking about Doug's question too, because when he talks about the words compare and contrast, I wanted to come back to that, because the audiences that Kyle and I are speaking to are very different. So the appetite for certain things will be one way for finance and accounting, but operations and logistics teams will care about something else. And Kyle's going to talk about this more, but I wanted to tee him up a little bit. And then you can imagine on the sales side how vastly different the audience would be for that. And so myself and Kyle, we are always very sensitive to that audience. So I keep repeating that word for a reason, because knowing who you're talking to and why it's relevant to them, because financial planning is not relevant to sales. Sales planning is not relevant to operational planners, but they all are doing forecasting and planning. And as long as you have the pieces that Kyle's going to walk through, it's going to be relevant to them. Please go ahead.
No, man, nailed it. While we're talking to audience in here, one of the beauties of this, though, is to have a single pane of glass that all the audiences can come back to the same data set and work from it. One of the biggest issues in business right now is siloed information, or having too much information, not knowing what to do with it. But by organizing it, which is what EPM Strong Suit is, allows you to have a single pane of glass to have people be able to look at both those pieces of data. So what we're going to do is we're going to show, hey, what does it look like to have a fully integrated system? We're going to, of course, everybody's beating the AI drum and the predictive planning. So we're going to talk through some of that, being able to use optimization logic that helps you be able to add in constraints and other things that would be a part of a model to come up with, say, hey, here's your best optimized plan that then people can take and execute on. At a higher level that then can go back into supply chain, they can use and push down, especially for longer periods of time. Being able to have a unified plan. You talk about that SMLP and you talked about, the execution plans, whatever those may be, you're trying to get one that everybody can work off of. Finally, the ability to make what ifs and variance reporting. So that's what I'm trying to show. Over here to the right is what we're actually going to walk down. And I want to tell you this, and I normally don't necessarily go through, here's my agenda for it, but I want to walk through so that way, as you see them, you can go, okay, this makes sense of what I'm showing and why, which is from a functionality perspective, we're going to load some data from supply chain. Just because invariably at the end of every kind of demo that we do, there's a lot of questions of how do I get data in the right spot and how does that work? I'm going to just give you a small little taste, but at least answer one of those questions. Well, then we're going to take our demand and we're going to use demand from history and we're going to predict it using algorithms and AI embedded in the application. We're going to update and we're going to look at some of the things just to kind of make sure people kind of understand, hey, I can update my production cost, I can change my material bombs, inventory, etc. And I'm going to look at my inventory and network, and then I'm going to run my optimization. At that, we're going to be able to see some results and go, okay, now what are we going to do with that? We're going to slice and dice it in SmartView and Excel, which is one of the great drugs of the tool, because you have the data in one spot and it allows you to kind of play with the data. So that's what we're going to walk through. And then in here, there is an embedded story of what you do based off of the information that was given.
And Kyle, one more quick thing before you jump off the slide. I know you're jumping into things, but taking what you just said, as well as the questions out there in the chat, the metrics and the indicators that you're going to be using, the variables with which you're going to be measuring, are also going to be vastly different across the different departments. However, they do have interdepartmental impacts. So if logistically, you've got raw materials, and then you're taking those raw materials and there's work in progress, and then eventually they become finished goods, and you have to get those finished goods to wherever whatever site or whatever location. But here's the thing: now that all matters absolutely for supply chain and operations, but why would finance care about that? Well, that entire railroad I just walked through is cost of goods sold, which is kind of an important thing on a P&L. So my point to the audience here is that recognizing how those pieces become critical. And back to the question out there around sales planning, I think that your sales folks would also care about whether you can get them finished goods to the sites and locations they're selling. Because if they're going to have these targets and they meet these targets, but then we can't actually deliver on the materials we've sold, it starts to become a chain reaction. So just trying to look at this from a much more high level, 30,000 foot view of why does this matter? Think about all three of those pieces and the other areas as well. HR planning, make sure the right people are where they need to be. It becomes very big, very fast, and you need a software that can help you do that. So anyway, Kyle, I just wanted to tee that up a little bit.
No, this is brilliant. Keep going, man. So as we're walking through the demo, that's going to come back. That whole sales thing is going to kind of be one of the potential, spotlights at the end of, hey, how do we handle this extra capacity? So let's walk through. We're going to use those different pieces. We have, now keep in mind, this is a demo, so we made it really nice and clean and easy and fast. The real world gets obviously a whole lot more messy, but that's the beautiful thing about EPM, is that it can handle all of those components. But in here, we got some plants, we got some warehouses, we got the ability to have retail stores, online and wholesale. And then, of course, we're going to be shipping it through multiple different methods, and we're going to try and figure out the answer of, hey, how much should we produce, where, and based on what? So let's go dive in the application. For those of you who have been a part of EPM in the past, this should be somewhat familiar to you. If you are new to this, it might look similar to some of your supply chain. So I know that we have a mixed audience here. But this is a web-based browser. This can be just as easily accessed in Excel. There is things like financials and some other things that might be traditional FP&A. But I have this optimization in here, and this is what we're going to walk through. And we have our certain pieces of information where we're going to go from demand, network, inventory, material, supply, over into the end results. But the first part that we have to do is get data into the system. And this is probably a no-no based on most demos, but because of the conversation always gets to this, I want to answer this question up front in about 10 seconds, which is that you can directly connect into any Oracle cloud-based application with a direct connection. With any Oracle on-premise or other SQL-based, you can have a widget that can go grab data. And if not, worst case scenario, you can grab a data, a whole host of things. It is agnostic, but of course it is Oracle. So anything that is Oracle related is a little bit easier and cleaner, and makes it a whole lot easier to bring data in. And this allows you to bring in data and map it. So I can have a source and I can have a target, which is one of the things that always comes into any of these extending out your supply chain. When you bring supply chain transactional data, but yet you're bringing it into a financial strategic conversation, many times you have to map the data up or organize the data that may not be Oracle related information, like quality at different places might drive some of the decisions, something along those lines. And so I can bring in different data sets. This is just showing you that I can see the mappings and bring it in. But this can be run in, this can be scheduled, it can be run on demand or on a schedule. At that point, you have data in the system, and then we're going to start to play with things. It does allow you to have the starting points of the dashboards and see where you stand. You can say, hey, okay, here's my actuals for what I've got going on currently. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start playing with this and go, okay, here's my actuals. I've got a certain setup where I can see how many stores I have. As I move in direct customers, I can expand in and change things around should I need to. But what we're going to do is we're going to flip over to our demand, and we're just going to walk this kind of from left to right. At this point, I'm not going to try and show you all the features and functionalities of EPM, which would be the traditional, let me show you how you can spread back and make changes. But right now, I am using what's called this point of view to help differentiate the data. So like on a scenario, I can bring in things. So what you saw is actuals. I could have different forecasting scenarios. I could have different versions that'll help me be able to segregate the data set and therefore
Hey, Kyle,
have what if analysis. Yeah, fire away, man.
really quickly, we're apparently the folks aren't seeing the application, so let's make sure we're sharing the.
Oh gosh, no, thanks, man.
No, thank you to the audience.
Let me reshare. I thought I was sharing my whole screen, and I guess I didn't. Let me pause back up.
There we go. Now I see the application. Hopefully, folks are seeing it now too.
All right, let's move back 2 seconds, and I'm gonna show you the data exchange part of the house, which is going to be over here just to show you that you can do data integration work and that you can have a workbench to show you the before and the after and how you map up the data. That was that first part that I was talking about, how you can get data in the system and have it organized, agnostic of where it comes from. Obviously easier from Oracle. From there, it does have, the ability to have management reporting and views that can show data across scenario, version, time period. Variance analysis will show variances here in a minute, but I'm going to start off with just showing you that we have actual history in here with some data. And then if I chose to, I can see different pieces of information that would allow me to play with information and click in and have an interactive dashboard. So in there, I clicked into my stores, and now I can see for each store that I have how much I sold, and then I can see, if I wanted to, where it came from, et cetera. So I've got a kind of quick dashboard. But right now we're going to move back into, I need to make some adjustments. I need to be able to do a new, operating plan at a level for us to make decisions. And so this is going to be taking data in, which I just brought in from supply chain and supply chain planning. We're going to marry that for a longer period of time, including some additional pieces that may flavor our financials that might make, flavor those business conversations. So we're going to come in here and we're going to change this. Let me get into our planning scenario. So I'm going to change that to plan and FY25. And where I was going with this was also that you have different ways of being able to type in and spread back on seasonality, which is really nice. So in this case, when you're planning, I've got my totals, but say I want to change this to 1500. I can change that to 1500 and it's going to spread back based on seasonality. I can go back in here and type in certain numbers of 120. I can put comments in there. So there's a lot of things that just help be able to help that planning process and capture data very quickly and easily. So it's not a burden on the team. It can show history and a bunch of other things that are important as you plan to understand where the data came from. But as I promised, we're going to try and start more with how do we leverage a system so we don't have to think about it as much. And we're going to use what's called predictive planning. And I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to use this form. If predictive planning, as long as you have a couple years worth of history, it will ripple through and you can do some more advanced stuff if you chose to set up how you actually use the predictive planning. But in this case, what it's going to do is going to look at it and go, okay, based on the time periods, it's going to predict a best case and worst case scenario. And allow you to be able to use that information. And I can do that for the store. I can use it for everybody. And then I can say, hey, look, I want to actually use that information based on the predictive piece. And I'm going to say, I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to copy the entire range. And I'm just going to do it for all members on the form and apply. And now I've brought in that information and I can use that for my planning, hit save. And I've updated my factors. to what was predicted by the application.
And fun fact here, when Kyle's showing this actually what you folks are seeing. This is the nascent beginnings of what became now today our intelligent performance management, our insights, our AI and ML. So some years back, when we had predictive planning, this is time series forecasting, and we saw this, and we wanted to make sure we had this available to allow the statistical methodologies that Kyle just walked you through visually. You saw that. But then over the coming years, to where we are now, we realized that customers wanted this and a whole lot more. But the core beginnings of what we're talking about here with predictive planning and time series forecasting and having that out of the box delivered content in EPM began here and then evolved into what is now our AI ML offerings, which of course now has Gen AI and has the insights and has the in intelligent process automation and all that stuff. But 5-6 years ago, this was predictive planning in the beginning stages of it. So anyway, I just wanted to share that little bit of history there.
No, yeah, absolutely. What Oracle is investing in the ability to have the system do a lot of the, I guess, processing and setup for you is really nice. What you didn't notice in this one is I also had the setup not only to put in my demand here, but you're going to see as we go along that you can, when I process this, I create a best case and worst case based off of the algorithms that are embedded in the application. Now, obviously, this is as a demo. I didn't bring a machine learning to this one, but Mike talked about that you can bring your own model.
Yep.
There's a lot of Gen AI coming down the road that allows you to type in for analytics and do some other things that are really nice. We're not trying to show that in this piece right here. What we are showing is the ability to allow people to work smartly and leverage artificial intelligence and algorithms to help answer those questions so then the people can make the decisions that should be made for the business. So in this case, I'm starting off with, I've got history and I've got different pieces, and I can either trust somebody outside the system on the sales side to give me the information, or I can actually use this to help start with the starting point to then say, now that I've got this demand, what should I do with it? Mike, fire away.
I like to and I just like to to give Kyle a moment here is what Kyle's showing here. Absolutely, there's demand planning here, but any data can be piped into this. So and the beauty of this, at the top there, you see scenario, years, period, channel. So for those who love their S-Base cubes, I know for me, you'll never take my S-Base cubes away from me. All that member dimensionality, all those functions at the core DNA level are still there. You're just bringing in different types of data. I always make the joke that the number of times in a month I water my trees, or the number of times people take their kids to school. This is very non-business, very non-financial data, but nothing is preventing you from putting that information into here and then taking advantage of the predictive planning that you just saw Kyle show you. So that's where we want folks to really expand their minds and go, wow, we could actually leverage this in a lot of different ways, as opposed to just getting very streamlined on one simple process. You can broaden this out to a whole holistic, transformation for yourselves.
Where this comes in play is things when, especially like retail, where you're looking at foot traffic, or you're looking at other metrics like weather, that Oracle supply chain is not necessarily going to use to help predict your demand. You can impact other factors to this. To Mike's point, is bring in data from other things that help you be able to more refine what you're going to say is your demand planning.
Hey folks, what if out there I hear customers tell me all the time, well, Mike, what if we want to bring in government economic data? Absolutely. If you have a data source and you want to drop it in here and use that as part of your variables and then make that part of your planning, there's nothing preventing you from doing that. As long as it exists somewhere, it can be dropped in here. So Kyle, I don't mean to keep
no, absolutely. No, we're hitting up some of the stuff, which is perfect. Just like we're shooting a bull on this stuff, this goes back to, we've had a number of clients more recently bring in the market demand and work down to their local demand, which is different than when you're using, like, say, supply chain, which is your demand and it's based on your current customer listing and history. So if you are trying to do that long range strategic plan, but married up with the way that supply chain can execute on it, this is where this kind of comes in play. Well, I am just showing you this as a piece in here. Any piece of data that can marry this up to help you with your demand or supply chain planning can be brought in here, whether it lives in Oracle already, or it's coming from, say, an SAP, or it's coming from some data warehouse. We can bring all that data in. So I'm going to keep moving on with this just to kind of we've put in some demand, we've added some factors, we've used the system to help leverage some pieces. In this case, I'm bringing in my network costs from transportation. This is what Manoj was talking about earlier. I can bring that information from, say, transportation. So I have all the routes of how do I ship from Boston to New Jersey to Columbus. Plus I can have, if there's not a route there, obviously I can't ship it that direction. What are my costs, my rates per ton, my rates per whatever, and bring that information in. From there, you obviously have your inventory and, say, your materials and BOMs behind it. And then finally, of course, what happens a lot of times as I get into these conversations is your production cost. Sometimes this is where the transactional detail is at a more granular level than is helpful out in the history. And so they need to have things more brought up to be able to plan way out in the future for, like, say, like labor, material, and other. And I get my production min and maxes. Anytime that you're talking about an optimization model, you have constraints, you have my demand, you have my supply, you have my constraints, whether they be production, inventory, how much I can store, etc. And so I've gone through here, I've made some updates. I'm going to go to my results tab.
And I'll just really mention really quick. Sorry, Kyle. I just for folks to take this, what Kyle's showing you here, you saw, he doesn't have to go back to it. I mean, he can. Thank you, Kyle. You see there the production and the labor. That labor line has a major impact on hiring and HR. And that's seeing where if that planning is synced up and solid, now you've got better hiring practices happening. You're starting to get those combination benefits that an organization can see from using supply chain and EPM together, as opposed to just this, what we like to call point solutions. It's very easy for a company to look at this as, oh, okay, we can replace spreadsheets and do this now. But imagine taking it to the other interdepartmental levels. Go ahead, Kyle.
Mike, there was a client about a year and a half ago that we literally, based off of the data, it created and converted it to the number of hours, that converted it to the number of people based on a metric, which then indicated when they expanded out how many heads they needed to hire because they were seasonal in nature. So when you hear that word connected planning, there's a reason Oracle chose that word, because it is connected. It's connecting the entire organization versus having a siloed organization or having a multi-step. One group does one thing and then passes it off, and then therefore you have to go back and figure out what was going on with it. And if you make a change, you got to go back up the chain, right? So the idea is bring all this stuff together. So continuing to move on with our current demo, in this one, we worked through from some different inputs. What we're going to do is we're going to, right click, we're going to run our optimization, and where we just had our routes and demand and what our sales price would be, basically, now we can have our price per unit. We brought in our labor per unit, our cost. That calculates out into our gross sales. So based off of trying to make sure that we maximize our profit, which is not maximizing our demand, but maximizing where do we make the most money based on the supply, the supply constraints, the demand minimum maximums. We have to supply something because we have so much with this company, but they might request more, right? That's a very common scenario in any different industry. But in this case, you can kind of work through this and go, hey, we make the most money selling to these people, so therefore that's where we should sell first, right? Working backwards, we're going to have all those pieces, and then we're going to build it up, and then finally bring it into how much money can we make. Come back up here and we can see our dashboard, and we can see, hey, based on this plan, we had our actuals, we now have our plan. I can see different metrics and still drill in should I want to. I can see different pieces. And you'll start to notice, kind of, you look through here, East Coast has the most production, then you got Dallas, Atlanta, and then finally Anaheim down here, which is pretty small, which we're going to look at here in just a quick second. I've looked at my results. I've now looked at my P&L, and then we're going to do the final part, which is jumping into Smart View, which is a slice and dice. But before I look at that, I can go, hey, I've created, and when I ran that and right clicked, it created a best case and worst case scenario based off of those percentages that we had put in. Using those predictive algorithms to say, hey, based on our base case, what's our best case and our worst case, in order to say how much money we can make based off of what's going on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to flip into Excel, and then we're going to answer questions. So last piece of this one, I wanted to kind of show you, once you get the data in a single spot, how this can help you answer questions. Now, the question that I'm going to answer is going to be, I'm going to look at this one and say, hey, I'm looking at all these ones. Anaheim has the lowest production. Well, is that because of their capacity? Is that because of something else? So this is Smart View. This is an Excel add-in. What you see here is based off of the rows and the columns. And the point of view, I'm producing data from the system. I'm just going to refresh real quickly. I'm going to bring that data in. And so I've got a starting point, and I can go use these things up top to be able to make selections, or I can just type it in. I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say production max. And so I'm going to hit refresh and say, hey, look, what's our production max? Well, I'm looking at Anaheim, which seems a little bit low, and it looks kind of low historically. Our production max is we're running at not even 50%. Is that what we should be running at? And what should we do about that? Well, let's maybe take a look at that and say, all right, well, let's analyze the sales to see what we might want to do. And so I've got this store up here. I can look at, total store or all store. In this case, I'm going to drag and I'm going to refresh and then drag and drop in here. And then from here, I'm going to actually flip this around. I'm going to, let me keep only on this. And let's just, because it is Excel, I'm going to change out the order of this one. And I'm going to first have my facility, basically where I produce it, to where it's selling to. So I could bring in the warehouse, I could bring in different things. But in this case, I'm just saying, hey, where is Anaheim selling to and what should we, potentially do about that? And if I look at this and kind of compare it, and let's just do some normal general Excel formatting. As I look through here, I can notice a couple things. One is that they're not selling, they don't even have any direct customers. While they've got stores and they sell to the stores and they sell, directly online, they don't have any direct customers, while a lot of other places do. But you can also see that they don't have as much demand. So it asks the question, okay, so what do we do with a store that has a lot of capacity? And at this point, we can answer certain questions. We can answer, is it demand on the West Coast versus East Coast? And I can look at this and say, hey, maybe we have two options here. So I can work with management and say, we have extra capacity at Anaheim. We can either try and get some direct customers and change our routes. So we could maybe sell, and we might lose a little money, but maybe we can ship it from Anaheim to a direct customer. We might not make as much somewhere else, or we can say, let's find a West Coast customer that we can find. So maybe we need to look and sales to target somebody over there. Maybe we need to open up more stores on the West Coast if we're trying to sell our way out, or maybe we need to, produce this information in Atlanta, which had some capacity. And maybe what we do is we look at, where do we open this up? Or maybe we put a warehouse somewhere else and we ship Anaheim to a central location. We need to open up different sales channels. So it allows you to ask those questions of, what do we do with the information now? Make business decisions. And at that point, then that information can go back in for the execution for things that are already needing to be matched up. So when you talk about supply chain is going to try and go, this is what I want. Now, how do I match it up inside the system? This is designed to go, how can I look at this information at an aggregated level to make business decisions that impact the organization? And when you can marry those two up, you have a very, very powerful tool. Now at that, I'm done with my fun demo side, and now I want to make sure that we just answer any questions. Mike and I kind of wrap it up and bring it back to an end. So
we do have a question out there already about implementation experience. What we've seen with implementation experience with having to tune the ad hoc models that customers might build to get practical run times.
That's yes, absolutely. So when you are talking about an optimization, you're talking about trying to ripple through all the potential intersections that can be done. And so you're just basically rippling through the different areas to come up with the constraints and come up with the best solution. We have done a lot of tuning to help that. And most of the time what you can do, at least now this kind of goes back to experience when you're implementing this, inside of EPM, you have some flexibility where to do more tuning than you do in, say, supply chain, because it is more flexible in its nature. And so what you're doing there is you're limiting the routes to start with versus trying to do a a looping logic versus more of a chunking logic, meaning that a lot of times it's I have this many stores, I have this many locations, I have this many customers, I have this many this, and then for all of them potentials. Well, you can limit that based on the number of routes, by the number of supply. You can do certain things to limit the possible combinations that the system runs against inside EPM. That help you tune that performance around that optimization. So the answer is, have we had experience? Absolutely. If you take things as a starting point, it's more multiplicative of your potential routes. But if you to help in business logic to help limit those pieces, it runs a whole lot faster.
And really quickly, I'll mention too that even for me, when I was a customer, and even now when I talk to customers, this is the advantage of performance management, because it is I talk with my hands a lot. Kyle will joke with me on that, but it's a living, breathing system for a reason. In the past, it was like, here's the software, good luck. And it's kind of a dead system. But today, the live nature of the cloud means that those ad hoc models, by the nature of them, they are changing daily, weekly, monthly. The system that I had, the planning system that I designed, a few years later when I left, it was vastly different from what was implemented, and changes have happened since I've left. And that's the idea, is that these things are evolving and adapting with you. So as your ad hoc models change and you're trying to get better, get faster, more efficient, logistically more effective in moving your goods, services, etc., making sure the right people are in the right places, all that kind of all those kinds of business problems you're trying to solve. These models move and adapt and evolve with you, and that's the nature of the cloud, the living, breathing system of both of these working together. You have error reporting, error exceptions, all the exception reporting, all of that is available to you, so you can see where, hey, we've hit a bottleneck and we need to fix this, and this wasn't here a year ago, but now it is. Supply chain is also a living, breathing problem that presents itself, things that happened, and hey, there's this railroad that's now down, or this airline is not able to take shipments right now. There's so many situations where you then have to calibrate the network by which you're going to shift and move things around, and this kind of tool, these kinds of models move with you. Kyle, go ahead.
No, I think it's perfect. As we're finalizing this one of the takeaways is EPM is designed to be flexible and powerful. It's also designed to grow with you and your business, because your business will change and you need an application that can change with you. So that's one of the advantages of using EPM to extend out your ERP investments in any area. But especially in one of the most critical areas, which is your ability to supply your business with the goods and services to sell, and where you should do that. So kind of going into those 5 bullet points, if you were going to kind of say, hey, why would you look at a solution like this one, is it's holistic in nature. It's designed for the entire organization. It's data driven and uses the analytics to be able to think with you and think and allow you to leverage the system for productivity, but also for its insights. The efficiency side of the house, to be able to stop having to do a bunch of data manipulations and take data out of the system once you're done, to be able to do it, being able to talk across the departments. Finally, doing those what if scenarios. What if I go ahead and open up additional channels so my Anaheim can go sell somewhere else? What happens then? If I do other things?
This is what happens when you get me and Kyle together. Obviously, all of a sudden we start, firing off of each other. But no, when Kyle was saying that, this is where we have an implementation audience here, right? We have customers that are thinking about what this means, and this is where, frankly, the concept of free form planning and how revolutionary that was. For those who have an S-based background, like myself, like Kyle, one of the limitations way back of S-Space when it was on-prem was because, well, you got a certain amount of processing power and data space with those cubes. Well, with free-form planning, that opened up the world, because now you could add dimensions. So let's say, you implement, and you can only see so much, right? You're looking through your telescope and you can only see so much. But 5 years down the road, turns out we need to be able to slice and dice that data. Well, in the days of yesteryear and of yore, it was, well, Kyle, Mike, we're going to have to blow up your cube and start from scratch. Now with Freeform, you don't have that anymore. You can add, you can change your cube. Now there are impacts to that, reporting and all that kind of good stuff. But the point is, you can do this that in the past you frankly could not. So when Kyle talks about, well, your operational models are going to change, you've got new logistical problems that have presented themselves 2 years from now, 4 years from now that you didn't anticipate, because who could? We don't all have crystal balls. And the reality is Freeform planning, connected planning will be there to meet your needs as you go forward.
Absolutely. So let me land the plane on this one, and then anybody who wants to stick around and ask questions, feel free. The final piece out of this is what you're trying to do as an organization is to increase its profitability. Who should I sell to and to maximize my revenue? Who should I sell to reduce my cost? How do I get goods to the right spot on the right time and be able to use the system? Thank you so much for this time, and we look forward to catching up with you soon.